In this video, I'll share my favorite tips for painting whiskers over dark and light colors in a way that makes sense and looks natural in your painting. To create thin, fine whiskers, use a brush with a pointed tip. This is a pointed round brush. Before picking up color, rinse your brush in water and wipe it on a towel, turning the brush to create a pointed tip. Before moving into your painting, it's helpful to warm up and practice on a piece of scrap watercolor paper. Here, I'm using a gray mix of ultramarine blue and burnt umber, but feel free to use any color that you have on hand. I find that the consistency of tea to milk works best. Pick up just a bit of color on the tip of the brush. To create the whisker, anchor the back of your hand to the table to keep your hand steady. The tip of the brush is barely touching the paper. That will help you to create a thin line. Do your best to create the whisker in one motion. But if you can't, if the brush skips a little bit, it's okay. You can go back over it and clean it up. More of the brush will create a thicker line. The tip of the brush will create a thin line. And when you're ready, move into your painting. What colors should you use when creating whiskers? Keep it simple. Over white or light subjects, pale gray, the consistency of tea to milk, creates natural-looking whiskers. And over dark subjects, I use a white product, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Use the tip of the brush to create curving and overlapping whiskers of different lengths. And you don't need to create as many whiskers as you see in the reference photo. Keep it simple so your whiskers enhance your painting without becoming too prominent. Over dark subjects, use a white product such as Dr. P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White, white gouache, white ink, or white acrylic paint. Experiment with any white products that you have on hand. Use the same technique for painting white whiskers. The consistency of milk, just a bit of color on the brush. Use the tip of the brush to create the whisker. Initially, when wet, the white might appear too intense, but it tends to dry lighter. If it appears too pale, you can go over it again. If your subject contains both light and dark colors, use gray in the lighter parts and your white product over the darker areas. In this little mongrel, I first created gray whiskers, even in the darker parts. Then I went in with white, and here I'm laying in the white right over that gray whisker. If your whiskers seem too white or don't look natural, apply a bit of pale gray or a darker color where the whisker originates. This will create a smooth transition from the dark fur into the lighter whisker. If you can't quite see the white whiskers, maybe they're blending too much into the surrounding area, apply a thin, pale line of gray along the edge of the whisker. I usually lay it along the lower edge. This will help to clarify that white whisker. It will help it to stand out, and make sure the gray is very pale. That way it will appear natural. The gray won't be too dark. In this cat, although the fur is lighter, I decided to create white whiskers. And to bring them out a bit more, I underlined the whiskers with pale gray, just enough to help the whisker stand out. But you can hardly see the gray. And do you see how this makes the white whiskers more distinct? In this calico cat, I'm underlining some of the white whiskers with pale gray to help them stand out. I'm also laying in some gray whiskers over the white parts, so you can use a mix of gray and white. I'm gently applying a bit of gray where the whisker originates, creating a smooth transition from the dark fur into the lighter whisker. I'm laying a bit of gray along the edge of the white whisker to help it stand out. And I'm going over some of the white whiskers with a second layer, making them a little more prominent. If you feel that the white product is too intense, too white, you can gently go over the whisker with a thin layer of color. Here I'm using pale yellow ochre. With a gentle touch, place the color right over the whisker and it will tone down the white just a bit. Use colors from your subject. It might be gray, brown, tan, whatever fits. And now, go and practice creating whiskers. Thanks for watching.